My love for gaming has always been closely connected to the co-op experience. There are plenty of single-player games that I loved growing up, but having two younger siblings, I was always looking for games that we could play together. So this is a video where I just want to talk about the co-op games that I played the most growing up. These are the games that made me fall in love with co-op gaming. To me, my gaming experience all started with the Sega Genesis. This was my very first console. I definitely played video games before this, usually at my friends' places or my cousins' places, but when we got the Sega Genesis, that was when I actually started putting in some decent hours into gaming. Sometime around 94 or 95, we got a Sega Genesis from my cousin. He just got the Sega Saturn. He no longer gave a about his Genesis. So we got that system and two co-op games. The first one was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Now this was not my first experience with Sonic. I was obsessed with the cartoons, and I played both Sonic 1 and 2 a lot at my cousin's place. But Sonic 2 was one of the first co-op games that I really fell in love with. Of course, I was always Sonic, and my sister, who was 2 years younger than me, was always Tails. And we loved this experience. But even early on at this time, we knew that it wasn't quite ideal for both players, as Tails would always kind of just be left in the dust while Sonic runs through the levels. But that doesn't mean that we didn't have a lot of fun with these games, especially when it came to the boss fights. This was the perfect time for Tails to shine. He was invincible, so he could just die over and over again, and he can kind of just test the waters, see the best method of taking out these enemies. There's no risk. If he died, he just came right back. So Sonic could either just stand on the side and let Tails die over and over, or just let Tails test it out, and then you kind of have a better idea of what your strategy might be going forward. Sonic 2 is still one of my favorite games of all time. I love the soundtrack, the gameplay is excellent, and it's definitely a fun game to pick up and play with a younger sibling. Unfortunately, I still think that they have not perfected the co-op Sonic gameplay. But the other game that we got with our Sega Genesis was Double Dragon. And this is a pretty weird introduction into the Double Dragon world, as this was an unlicensed port, but it's actually pretty faithful to the arcade version in many ways, especially visually. And of course, it actually has the two-player co-op gameplay intact, unlike the NES version. However, this game feels pretty clunky and it moves way too fast, but we didn't know any better back in the day. To us, this was just a fun, equal co-op experience. Me and my sister played this game numerous times. We got really good at it, so we could just beat it every time we played it. I can't even tell you how many times we beat this game. It was a lot. But I remember specifically, at the end, when you beat the game, both players have to then fight each other, and whoever wins gets the girl. I remember specifically getting really upset with my sister if she beat me. So I would always pretty much tell her, hey, you need to let me win. And half the time that worked. I've since gone back and tried this version of Double Dragon, and it is not great. There are way better versions, but it's definitely not the worst version. But shortly after that, I got my hands on Streets of Rage 2. I never actually owned this game as a kid. I played it at my cousin's house a bunch of times, and then it became a regular rental for us. I actually never beat this game as a kid, but I played it over and over and over again and would always get to the end boss and couldn't finish it. Now I can pretty consistently beat the game anytime I pick it up, but at the time it felt a lot more difficult. But even as a kid, I knew that this was an excellent beat 'em up. It was way better than Double Dragon. The themes were darker, the music was excellent, and the gameplay and the character selection was all a huge step up. Throughout my entire life, Streets of Rage 2 has always been my go-to pick up and play game. And every single time I start it, I have to play it all the way through. Still to this day, it's just the best beat 'em up of all time as far as I'm concerned. And it definitely shaped my love for the beat 'em up genre. And of course, I can't talk about co-op gaming and the Sega Genesis without mentioning Toejam and Earl, the original one. I think this is the first game that we ever rented. I immediately loved the goofy humor and just the slow-paced, chill gameplay. But the thing that really stood out to me was the dynamic split screen. I had never seen anything like that before. If you're together, you're on one screen. If you separate, it switches to split screen. I'm pretty sure this is the first game to ever do that. Still to this day, I think that's just one of the most underrated features in co-op gaming. And for a game that's all about exploration, this feature was essential. And when I was so used to playing Sonic the Hedgehog, and where Tails would just not even be on the screen most of the time, it was just really refreshing to see what was possible for a co-op game. This game was truly an equal experience. And there wasn't one player that took complete control and dominated the camera. You actually had to work together here. I could go on and on about Toejam and Earl. It's still one of my favorite games of all time, and I just think that it was way ahead of its time. And again, this is another one of my go-to games. I didn't have an NES when I was really young, in like the late 90s. I remember finding one at a garage sale for $5. I think the only game that it came with was Dragon Warrior. But years before that, the same cousin that gave us the Sega Genesis, I remember we would have sleepovers at his place, and he was about 5 years older than me. So sometimes me and my brother, we would just be hanging out at his place for hours while he would be doing, I don't know, sporting events or hanging out with his friends or something. We would just be alone in his room for some reason. But I remember one time we were just snooping around and we found his old NES, and he had a stack of decent games. One of those games was Bobble. Me and my brother just played this game over and over and over for the entire weekend, and it quickly became a new co-op favorite for us. This is another one where I could just play this game for hours. Even though it doesn't have a lot of variety in gameplay, and that song is pretty repetitive and gets kind of annoying, it's still just a classic game, and you really can't go wrong with any version of Bobble. The same thing could be said about the Super Nintendo. I finally got a Super Nintendo when the SNES Junior came out, but before that, I remember playing a lot of Super Nintendo at my other cousin's house. One time we rented a game called Goof Troop. This was a very puzzle-heavy game. I just remember watching my cousins trying to figure it out, and they got bored of it really quickly. But a couple years later, when I finally had my own Super Nintendo, I got this game and I fell in love with it. This is one of the few games that I actually got my stepdad to play with us, and he really liked it as well. It's kind of like an old-school Zelda game, but more linear and level-based. I think this is one of the best co-op games of all time, and it's probably the game that I've beaten more than any other game in the world. I still love picking this game up maybe once a year and playing through it. It's always going to be one of my favorites. Another one of my childhood favorites on the Super Nintendo was Kirby Superstar. I played Kirby's Adventure on NES a little bit here and there, but Kirby Superstar was my first real experience with the Kirby franchise, and it was a great entry point, as this was one of the first Kirby games to have co-op gameplay. Kirby still has his copy ability, but now he's able to turn that ability into a helper, so the second player can kind of choose who he wants to play as. This game is full of different stories and mini games that you can play through. It's a pretty nice collection for the time. I don't know if it's the best Kirby game, but it's definitely my favorite one. And then when the Nintendo 64 came out, this is a time where we got a lot of split-screen competitive games, but there were a handful of co-op games that I always played with my friends. Gauntlet Legends was one of the most important games of my childhood. I would have sleepovers with 3 of my friends, and we would just stay up all night playing Gauntlet Legends. I remember we would just go through the first few levels just grinding. We'd play them over and over and over again, or just stand there and let the enemies come out of the generator. Just hold the button until you level up, and we just keep doing this until we were strong enough to beat the dragon. I still don't know if I've ever even beaten this game, but I put a lot of hours into it, and it's probably the first 4-player co-op game that I really spent a lot of time with. Another game that I played a lot of was GoldenEye, but this was specifically a competitive game for us. But once Perfect Dark came out, I don't think I really ever went back to GoldenEye. It had all the same levels that were my favorite that you could play in the competitive mode, but you could also play through the entire story mode in split-screen co-op. I still think that this is one of the best split-screen co-op first-person shooters. Although if you play the N64 version, the controls don't really hold up well, and the frame rate is pretty terrible. But back in the day, it kind of just blew my mind. And then when the 6th generation of consoles came out, we had the PS2, the GameCube, and the Xbox. This was the first generation where I actually had all of the consoles while the generation was current. I was in middle school, I was old enough to start mowing lawns, so I saved up and bought myself a PS2. I think we ended up getting the Xbox for Christmas at one point, and then my brother got the GameCube. But I think the original Xbox was the system that I played the most in that generation. Much like Goof Troop, for some reason, my dad became obsessed with Hunter the Reckoning. Gameplay-wise, it's very similar to Gauntlet Legends. It's pretty much a dungeon crawler, but with a horror theme, and you could play it 4-player co-op. We loved this game when it first came out, but like I said, for some reason my dad got obsessed with this game and he just played it constantly. So We got sick of it, we moved on to the next thing, and he just kept playing this game by himself. But those first few months when me, my brother, my sister, and my dad all played this together, those were some pretty fun gaming experiences. But the other game on Xbox that I played more than anything else was Halo. But before the game came out, I remember I had a subscription to Xbox Magazine, and we got a demo of the original Halo, but it only had one level on it. I played that level over and over again and just mastered it with my friend. So when the full game finally came out, I think we rented it, and we slowly went through and played the levels leading up to that one level. Once we got to that one, we pretty much did a flawless speed run the first time we tried it, and that was just a very satisfying experience. Of course, I played Halo 1 and 2 competitively a lot. Those are my first experiences playing online gaming, and we would regularly have Halo parties with our friends with system links and everything. When it comes to the original Halo and Halo 2, I just love the campaign. Again, some of the best split-screen co-op first-person shooters ever made. I'll never get sick of those. So there you go. Those are just 11 examples of some of the games that I played growing up. Those are the ones that stood out to me the most, that I probably played the most back in the day. And they definitely helped develop my taste and my strong love for co-op gaming in general. But there's lots of other games that I didn't talk about as well. What are some of your favorite co-op games? What are the ones that made you fall in love with co-op gaming? And if you enjoyed this video, check out this video where we talked about every single co-op Zelda game. And thanks for watching.